Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Continuing this talk of Luang Por Sumedho's, given at the Leicester Summer School on the 3rd of August 2001, and this talk is called Welcoming Everything. Awareness, then, is just noticing the way it is, the way your body is for one thing, and the way your mental state is. So it is embracing, welcoming, noticing, but not critically. So being aware is being alert, awake, and intelligent. It's an alive sense of being, yet it's not passive or a negative acceptance of life through any kind of resignation to fate. You may have denied or rejected things in the past, but in awareness you include and open to them. Awareness includes even that feeling that it shouldn't be like this. It includes that also. There's nothing you can think or say or do that doesn't belong at this moment. No matter how complicated your thought processes might be, it belongs. No matter what state your body's in or your emotional state, whether you feel successful and happy or depressed and a failure, it all belongs. Then there is a sense of, oh, what a relief. I don't have to endlessly try to purify myself or try to make myself better. I can actually rest a bit, maybe relax and trust. What a relief. But then we think, what will I do if I don't have to do anything? If we grasp this idea of not having to do anything, quote unquote, that also becomes absurd. So, not having to do anything is a reflective statement rather than an ideal that you hold to. If you attach to, now I don't have to do anything, that becomes an ideal again. The point is to try to use language for reflection, rather than for taking a position on anything. The sense of, I've got to get something I don't have. What is that? Be the observer of it. I'm not good enough the way I am. I've got to make myself better. I've got to do something to improve myself. What is that like when you observe it as a mental state? To me, it's an incredible pushiness all the time, a sense of always being goaded on. And as long as I don't recognize it and don't see it in terms of Dhamma, it affects everything that I do. It's a kind of underlying influence of how I experience life. This constant sense that I have to get something I don't have, that I'm incomplete, imperfect, not good enough, that I've got to become enlightened, is bhava tanha in the Second Noble Truth. This is the desire to become, so it's the cause of suffering. So when talking about this area, then it's difficult to sometimes get a sense of what's being talked about. We say that sense of relief. Oh, I don't have to do anything. Then as he says, taking that as an idea, then that becomes something that the mind hangs on to and makes into an ideal or a principle that is sort of is attached to. And so that the kind of principle that's being described is learning how to live without our motivation and activities based upon self-view. And so there's this Dhamma teacher in Canada called Kema Ananda, who was the one who founded Arrow River Dhamma Center, where Ajahn Punadhammo has his center now at his monastery. That was Kema Ananda was a lay teacher who was Ajahn Punadhammo's teacher when he was a lay person. When he went off to Thailand to become a monk, and then Kema Ananda became very ill, passed away, and then Ajahn Punadhammo came back and took over Arrow River. One of Kema Ananda's kind of principles that he would talk about in this respect was to cultivate diligent effortlessness. So diligent effortlessness. And another expression you can use that Tsoknyi Rinpoche would employ as a way to encompass the same principle is undistracted non-meditation. Undistracted non-meditation. So those are deliberately, say, contradictory terms. Diligent effortlessness. So diligence seems to mean like, yes, get in there and do something. And effortlessness is like, yeah, don't do anything. There's nothing to do. Or undistracted, to be undistracted, to mean implies to be focused and to be attentive, but then to call it non-meditation, it's like, oh, but those terms are deliberately coined to give that mixture of both the putting forth of effort, but that effort not being something that is stressful. And so that is a theme that I've looked at and talked about a lot over the last couple of years in particular, because it's such a strong, say, habit that we have culturally, that it's a sort of, thank God it's Friday. Oh, thank goodness, now it's the weekend. Or I'm really looking forward to my holiday. Oh, I'll be really pleased when the retreat starts, or when the retreat is over. Then I will. When I can retire, then that is any kind of activity or doing or engaging, even the activity of meditation, is a thing that I'm doing that can become burdensome. So the mind looks forward to this promise of relief when I don't have to do this thing, even if the thing is meditation. As I often point out, often the most peaceful moment in meditation is when the bell rings. And I don't have to do that anymore. The mind can just, there's not just because your knees are able to relax, but because there's this sense of permission to not be doing something, and there's this easing of the heart. And so that I feel this is a kind of cultural habit that we have, as a way that effort of any kind is seen as being intrinsically stressful, or somehow it's a burden or a problem or something that it would be good to not have to do. That the very presence of activity and decision making and work is seen as some kind of a stressful and say burdensome presence in our lives. But if that was the case, then there could be no such thing as right action, right livelihood, right effort in the Eightfold Path. There could be no way of making choices and working and taking action that was not conducive to peace. So they couldn't be part of the Eightfold Path, right? Because they intrinsically involve decision making and effort being made, direction being given to our lives. So there has to be some way that there can be right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, and so on, right concentration. That is somehow effort is being made and direction is being given, but that's not in any way stressful or to do with suffering, but is actually directed towards peacefulness and towards clarity. So this is a very central issue, that sort of the feeling of, thank goodness I don't have to do anything. It's not a matter of actually not doing anything, but it's the I element, I would say. And I do harp on a lot about self-view and make that a very, very regular theme of what's picked up on in these teachings and what I talk about. But I feel, that's the main culprit for dukkha. It's the first of the 10 fetters, self-view, sakkaya ditthi, and so that's in a sense the primary obstacle to really finding peace and contentment and fulfillment in our lives. So that the I don't have to do anything doesn't mean to say not doing, but it means me not doing. But there can be doing being done. Does that make sense? So that the theme here that Luang Por is pointing to, and it's Pava Tanha, is that any kind of Bhava Tanha and Vibhava Tanha, they're always tied up with that I, me, and mine, the I-making and mine-making tendency of the mind. And so that when we want to identify what is right effort, the Samma Vayamo, how right effort is actualized and developed, then the signal is that right effort always has a quality of being free of self-view. It's not me restraining the unwholesome, or me letting go of the unwholesome, me cultivating the good or maintaining the good, but rather there's those qualities of right effort are cultivated, but without the I, me, and mine being woven into the mix, so that bhavatanha vibhavatanha, the desire to become, the desire to get rid of, it's always I should, I've got to get, I want to be, I need to get rid of, I shouldn't be. The signal, the kind of the flag or the indicator that it's the motivation is bhavatanha vibhavatanha, that desire to become, desire to get rid of, is that the kind of presence of I and me and mine in the mixture. When we grasp this desire to become bhavatanha, we experience unsatisfactoriness, dukkha. Vibhavatanha is where you have the feeling that you have to get rid of something. You have to get rid of greed because you're too greedy. And you have to get rid of anger because good people are not angry. You have to get rid of jealousy because it's disgusting to be jealous. You have to conquer your fears because a brave person is fearless. And you have to get rid of whatever. It's all vibhavatanha. I'm not good enough the way I am. I'm greedy. I get angry. I get jealous and frightened. And I've got to get rid of those emotions. Just notice this attachment. In a logical sense, we should purify the mind. We should free ourselves from these passions. These are imperatives in the holy life, having to purify and free ourselves from the lower realms, the passions, the selfishness. It isn't that that is wrong, but just notice the attachment to the idea that I've got to get rid of this. It's my problem, and I'll never be enlightened as long as I have this anger. This is what the Buddha was constantly pointing to in this attachment, upadana, which is coming from the sense of I am this person, I am this body, these are my problems, and they're blocking me from enlightenment. I've got to get rid of them. The whole thing is based on the delusion of I am this person. So Buddho, that awakened awareness, transcends the personality belief, sakkaya ditthi. It embraces everything and therefore embraces your personality rather than judges it. This is when we talk about the absolute subject rather than the personal subject. When we attach to a personality, we become a personality and interpret experience through the distortions of our personal habits. And as long as that illusion is not seen through, not realized and accepted, we're always going to be frightened. If we are the human body, and if we are the person, we can be physically harmed and emotionally humiliated. We all experience these things in many ways. Bodies are vulnerable states, and emotionally we can be damaged just by what somebody might say to us, or how they look at us. On a personal level, therefore, being harmed in some way is never a present possibility. This is taking things personally, and makes the situation that we are living in rather fraught. So this is the way that Luang Por Sumedho would often define self-view, is that perception, I am the body, I am this personality. And it's not saying that bodies aren't here, and that we don't have a name or a personality and different characteristics, as we were having in that conversation the other day. We have a whole variety of different personality traits and such like. But it's the I am that's the kicker, that's the thing that makes the difference. And so that the distinction he makes here between the absolute subject rather than the personal subject, the absolute subject is a way of talking about that quality of awareness, that quality of knowing. Like right in this moment, there's the hearing of the sound of my voice, or there's the feeling of the weight of your body on the cushion or the chair, and the feelings of understanding or not understanding, and so on and so forth. And so that that quality of awareness that knows that awakened, aware knowing, if that's, say, clarified and unbiased in any way, then that knowing isn't taken to be a person. It's not me hearing, me feeling, it's not my mind or my experience, but rather there's knowing, there's feeling, there's experiencing, and it's not claimed as a person who's understanding or not understanding, a person who's feeling or a person who's hearing. It's just that quality of awareness that is unlimited or unaffected by those, say, the details of a personal conditioning. The personal subject is I am hearing, I'm understanding, I'm not understanding, I like, I don't like, I agree, I don't agree, I'm confused, and now I understand. This is something that I've got. I need to hear more of this so I can understand better. I don't understand well enough yet. All those I ams, I've got, I feel, the degree to which that I is solid and genuine and I say not questioned, then that's what we call the personal subject. So that if the mind conceives things in terms of self-view, I'm the body, I'm the personality, as an absolute reality, then we are women, we are men, we are old, we're young, we're understanding, we're not understanding, and that the mind is born into those conditions. And as Luang Por is saying here, bodies are vulnerable states. Emotionally, we can be damaged just by what somebody might say. So the more that the mind is identified with the body, with the personality, and with emotions and thoughts and concepts, then if we have an opinion and someone says, I don't agree, then I've been attacked. Then there's opposition between me and the other person. If there's no attachment to an opinion, someone says, I don't agree, oh, that's interesting. So rather than me being attacked, there's just a recognition, oh, different people have different opinions. That's a different way of seeing things. There's no conflict, there's no contention there.
So Ajahn, the purifying process then would be more like purifying ourselves from the self-view and taking it personal rather than purifying ourselves from our problems.
That's the main thing, is clarifying that quality of awareness, so that when things are named as problems or as gifts or as characteristics, then the mind is not holding those in terms of this is me, this is what I am, this is myself. Like in the Anatalakkhana Sutta, etang mama, this is mine, eso hamasmi, this is what I am, eso me ata, this is my true self. So that if that's clarified, then it makes it that much easier for the mind to work with both with problems, like saying anger or jealousy or fear, or with attributes, positive attributes, because you can have positive qualities like being able to concentrate, having a lot of wisdom, and being very kind. If the mind claims it as who and what you are, then even wholesome things can become a real pain in the neck. It can become a real burden and something that become obstacles to realization. That makes sense?
In the practice of mindfulness, the field of experience can be become aware of. I wonder how come it's limited to our body or the six senses of this body. Like what this body can experience.
In truth, it's not limited to the. If you take the sixth sense as the mind sense, then it is limited to that. That's all that can be experienced is because of the karma of birth. Then it's known through the agency of this life, this body, this mind. So even if the mind is aware of say, profound states of concentration, or can even say look into different realms of existence, that's still kind of manovinyana, mind consciousness. It's still mental events. I'm not sure if that answers what you're asking.
Just in the contemplation of non-self, so would make more sense that the awareness include more than in this physical body. I was just wondering.
Well, it's because of our birth. I mean, it's tricky to talk about because of the karma or the resultant karma of birth, then this is where life is experienced through the agency through the medium of this life, this mind. There is this body and its senses, and so that's where life is felt. But to say, well, what's life? What's the universe and everything? What's the experience of that apart from this body and this mind? The Buddha said, don't think about it. it's kind of you can't meaningfully imagine that. Or because it's similar to say, what's the experience of an enlightened being after the passing away of the body? The Buddha just said, you can't. Words and concepts don't apply. You can't use words and concepts to describe that quality. So it's more skillful not to even try. I often quote that the passage from the dialogue of the Buddha with Upasiva, when he says, "One who has reached the end has no criterion by which they can be measured. That which can be spoken of is no more." So that you can't. The normal ways of reckoning of play, three-dimensional space, time, individuality, they don't apply. And so that's so outside of our ordinary scope and the experience of an individual being's life and perceptions, that there's no words or concepts that can accurately represent that. So the Buddha put his attention on, say, well, just where the world we can know is the world of eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. That's the world we can know. So, as that passage I often quote from the Samyutta Nikaya, where the Buddha said that in the world, that whereby one is a perceiver of the world and a conceiver of the world, that is what we call the world in this Dhamma discipline. So the only world you can meaningfully speak of is the world of seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, thinking, feeling. To speak of a world that's conceptually outside that is meaningless. And so at least in the Buddha's approach towards things, and so so it's a very say practical. It's you're going through the gateway of this individual life, this individual experience, rather than some sort of cosmic theory or sort of what they call a metaphysical teaching, something that's trying to describe what's outside of the sphere of our range of knowledge and conception. That makes sense? Yes?
Does that include an out-of-body experience?
Yeah, so that's mind consciousness.
You said that's the mind projecting.
Yeah, yeah. It's not uncommon. People say having an operation, and they're kind of hovering around the ceiling of the operating theatre, going, "Oh, I know that bloke. he looks familiar." And so that it's mind consciousness. It's just the mind is dissociated from the body at that point. The body is a visual object at that point, or it can be the mind is sort of projected away from the body and is off visiting different parts of the world or wherever. But it's still mind consciousness arising and passing away. Yes?
And when the word awareness is that within our context of discernment and wisdom rather than consciousness.
It depends how you use the words.
Yeah, exactly. They overlap. So I'm thinking in terms of right view, then awareness is that it is with.
Yeah, I would say my use of the word awareness, or I would often say awakened awareness, or vijja, for that quality of knowing, which is the opposite of avijja, ignorance, not seeing clearly. Vijja is seeing clearly. So that I would say that's synonymous with mindfulness and wisdom, and that they overlap. But with right view, samadhi, when that is seeing with that unbiased view, that knowing, that awareness that is uncluttered by greed, hatred, and delusion.
So, in terms of the two extremes of self-using psychoidity, there's the extreme of eternalism, the extreme of nihilism. So there's viewed with those extreme views.
You know, it's knowing those extremes if they arise. If the thought everything exists arises, that awareness knows, oh, this is the thought everything exists. Or the thought nothing exists arises, and that awareness knows that nothing exists, you know, is a thought that's arising. It knows those concepts or formulations as just that, as concepts. Okay, to continue. Learning to see this in terms of Dhamma then, in terms of this buddho, or this still point, gives us the perspective on the way things are. This is developing wisdom, rather than just reinforcing personal views of everything, because wisdom is a universal. It's not personal. It's not, I am wise. We cannot claim wisdom as some kind of personal attribute, but it certainly operates when we let go of identifying with the personality and the body. If we do claim it on a personal level, if we do start interpreting it in terms of, I'm an attained person, I'm an arahant, or anything like that, then we call it, quote, spiritual defilement, unquote. The impurities that come through insight practices. That's why there are very strict rules about this in the bhikkhu discipline. There are 4 disrobing rules, and one of them is if a bhikkhu claims high states that are not true, just to delude or exploit others. Even if I have no bad intention and start saying that I'm an arahant as a result of a particular experience, that is also an offence that I have to confess. It's much lighter weight, so if it even if it's a mistaken impression, so you're not saying it to delude others, but you are it's still an offence, but it's not the intent to deceive. It's just what they call an overestimation. And actually, even if you are an arahant, as a monk or as a nun, even if you are an arahant or you have some accomplishment, and you tell someone who is not a monastic, that's it's still an offence. So if someone who is genuinely an arahant says to a layperson, I am an arahant, that's an offence of the same weight as telling a deliberate lie or killing an animal. So it's not to be done. So even if it's true, it's still an offence. I've had experiences through heavy concentration where I have felt I was enlightened. Oh, I'm enlightened now. But really, it's better not to say anything. Ajahn Chah would say, well, just keep quiet and practice a little more. Then it'll go away. It's true. Even in Thailand, there are people constantly looking for arahants. Who's an arahant? Who's a stream enterer? There's a strong desire to achieve and attain, and to know what other people's attainments are. So, as soon as they hear that somebody's enlightened, they run off to them. One monk I remember years ago claimed he was enlightened. This was one of Ajahn Chah's disciples, and a whole lot of monks suddenly left Ajahn Chah for him. Ajahn Chah wasn't claiming anything, so they left him behind, because they wanted to be with an enlightened master, but they were disappointed. The point is, most of us prefer to put our trust in those who say they are enlightened. You get these people who are very confident, these gurus that appear and say, I am the Messiah, or I am the Maitreya Buddha of this era, and people flock to them. Some of these gurus are so confident, in fact, that their confidence has a kind of sparkle to it. When you're really positive, you have a kind of radiant quality about you. The cults that you hear about seem to have the craziest teachings, and the leaders are the most obvious con artists, some of them totally convinced of their own enlightenment. And that kind of confidence is very powerful. So when we don't trust ourselves, we easily give ourselves over to people we think know what they're doing. So just to go back to that a little bit, so Ajahn Chah would never make any kind of claim about being an arahant, and whenever people would ask, he'd say, don't ask if I'm an arahant, but ask yourself why you're not. Or he would say something like, it takes one to know one. Or those kind of, he'd always sort of hand it back to the person in some way, shape or form. And then one interesting and beautiful way he spoke about it was, that gave the name to the book, A Tree in a Forest. He said, I'm like an old tree in the forest, and the birds come and settle in the branches, and some of the birds say, he's an arahant, he's an arahant. And some of the other birds say, he's not an arahant, he's not an arahant. So to me, that's just the chattering of the birds. A very good way of putting it, because and it's very true. You don't come across quite so many people claiming to be Maitreya Buddha, at least in the West nowadays. It's gone out of fashion a bit, but at a certain point there was like 5 different people around the world all claiming to be the Maitreya. It's kind of interesting. And, so that it's a fact that when people have a tendency towards doubt or insecurity, when someone does come along and says, I know the truth, this is the way, just follow me, that there's something in us that likes that confidence. It was a point that Luang Por Sumedho would make in this era and slightly before, when Margaret Thatcher was the Prime Minister of England. He'd say, even if people hate her, they really like the fact that she's absolutely certain about what she says and what she does, even if they they disagree with things. That kind of complete confidence that she would exude would somehow give people a sense of reassurance, which is obviously a limited kind of a refuge, but it was a good example that when someone is that absolutely certain about their own rightness, then that there's a kind of reassurance, or a sense of, well, stay close to this person because at least they know what's happening, they know where they're going. I'm not quite sure whether they're right, but they're really sure about it, and I'll just tag along behind and hope for the best. So that is something that Luang Por Chah would never feed, or wouldn't be, say, putting that out as a message to anyone, or Luang Por Sumedho, like, I understand everything, just follow me and everything will be fine, or listen, I'm the one who knows the truth. But the style is much more, what do you think? How does it seem to you? Or what difference does it make to you if I'm an arahant or I'm not an arahant? You're still suffering, right? And so that the style of practice is not to inflate the individual, but to, in a sense, encourage the people who want to learn to really teach themselves. And so when people would project onto Luang Por Chah and sort of look up to him or idolize him, he would find various different ways of bringing people down to earth. Or if people claimed that they were enlightened, then he would test them out. And there's a famous incident I think I mentioned the other day, where somebody who claimed to be an anagami came to see him and wanted to kind of let Luang Por know, that inform him of his accomplishment, and was seemingly expecting Luang Por Chah to kind of be sort of appreciative or applauding and say, "Oh, well done, pleased to meet you," and so forth. And so Luang Por's comment was, "Oh, in the village where I grew up, anagami is another word for mangy dog." And in northeast Thailand, or in Thailand in particular, to call someone a dog, or to make some sort of reference, even an oblique reference to calling someone a dog or a mangy dog, it was obviously extremely insulting. And the fact that rather than saying "congratulations, well done on your anagami-ship," Luang Por said, "Oh, we say you use anagami as a way to talk about a mangy dog," then he got really upset, this would-be anagami, and kind of stomped off. And then Luang Por Chah's comment after he sort of got up and left was, "Oh, an angry anagami, that's a first."
I was wondering, the people who make these claims, especially claims to be anagamis or arahants, I was wondering do you think their minds have certain kind of evasion mechanisms that, because surely if anger and lust will still arise in them, if it's not true, which probably won't be, if they are making these claims, but then do you think their minds are kind of trying maybe subconsciously to hide that information away?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Convincing themselves over and over
It's their inner legal team, the weasel team.
So it just
It's
tells
to
them
say
this is
that's
not-
kind of it making excuses for things, like saying this isn't anger, this is just appropriate wrathfulness. I'm just being fierce. I'm not angry. I'm just being fierce. Or this isn't lust. It's just a natural process that the mind chooses to follow. And so that there's a huge amount of self-deception, self-delusion in that. And it's one of the situations where having a lot of intelligence is a great hindrance, because you've got a really good legal team that can make a case for anything. And that so there's a lot of people that have had some kind of powerful experience, and then a claim to be enlightened, and then because of their own confidence or their own assessment, even when their own teachers have said, I don't think so, they say, well, I'm sorry, Ajahn, but you're wrong, Guruji. That's your impression, but I am enlightened. And so they gather sort of disciples, people around them, or other people are convinced of that. But eventually, the kind of self-promotional, the self-deception is going to fall away. And often, then people who are around them say, actually, the emperor, the story of the emperor's new clothes. The emperor is naked. This person isn't really enlightened, and that they were just deceiving themselves, or that was a kind of an overestimation. And once in a while, it would happen that somebody genuinely thinks that there's been some great accomplishment, and then they will sort of let their friends know, or let people know, not out of inflation, but just they think that's their assessment of what's transpired, what's happened within them. And then they'll realize later, I really I misread that, I misunderstood that, and I didn't read that correctly. And so that they would then, and then they might go around and say, I'm terribly sorry, I was talking about that, I realized I was mistaken, that wasn't the case at all. But the situation is more often the case that somebody will make a kind of claim and then present themselves as being an enlightened teacher, and then try and back that up and project that as long as they can, and then they'll just gather a certain group around them, and that'll sustain itself for a time. But usually, more and more people fall away. I was just told one fellow who was proclaimed himself as enlightened. His magazine was called "What Is Enlightenment," and he just got. Within the last couple of years, he got abandoned by his whole community. Said, "No, you're not really enlightened. We're totally mistaken. The whole thing was a fraud, and we're off." And so within a period of a month, he went from having a large community around him to pretty much everyone disappearing and leaving him to his own devices, and also him recognizing or acknowledging himself that he had some powerful experiences, but he did have a lot of ego and attachments that he wasn't acknowledging. So it's that's one of the great reasons why friendship in the holy life is so important. That when you kind of have some powerful experience, and you go to your friends and you say, "Oh, well, this has just happened. I think this is something significant here," and they go, "Say that again," and they're gonna. People will give you feedback or say, "Well, I'm not too sure about that." Well, like I was saying the other day about that instance where Luang Por Sumedho just told somebody that the experience they had was sobana citta, the beautiful mind, and that he heard sobana and thought it meant sotapanna, meant stream entry. So he thought, Ajahn Sumedho told me I'm a stream entry. I was carrying that around, but it's also that Luang Por Chah never proclaimed himself as an arahant, but he is regarded as having reached arahantship, and that incident I was describing the other day, where the novice drank out of the kettle, and Luang Por kind of went into his kuti for 10 days, and then came out with and said okay, that's that done with. So that was according to the communal understanding. That's when he sort of realized arahantship was during that time. and that, but he never made any claim about it. And any kind of people, when they would try to sort of work him around to the subject, he would pretty much always hand it back to them and say, well, "Don't ask if I'm enlightened, ask why you're not," and such like. And so that he would, because he could see that there was, people get a lot of sort of charge or faith or excitement or stimulus from getting close to someone who's accomplished, and he could see that there's a lot of kind of obstructive emotion around that. Kind of that the good thing is out there, that I'm close to this Ajahn, this great being who's there, and then they're ignoring what they need to do on themselves because the attention's going to being close to the great one, to drawing near to the bright light. And so Luang Por Chah would be always holding up the mirror saying, "Don't look at me, look at yourself." So when people tried to flatter him, or sort of, he had this amazing way, even though I couldn't understand Thai very well, he had this amazing way of just sort of not being moved by that kind of praise or adulation or flattery or devotion. He would sort of somehow kind of dodge out of the way, or or reflect it back to people, and always say, "Look at yourself. Work on yourself. That's where you can really make a difference. Whether there's something special about me or not. What about you?" And then that was an incredibly helpful, powerful teaching. And he didn't need to be praised or loved or revered. There was absolutely no need in him for that whatsoever. It was kind of amazing. Because I was, as a kid, as a teenager, and as a young person, I was very focused on approval. Wanting more approval, the better. I wanted to succeed and be liked and approved. And in a way, it was being around him was the first time that I was near anyone that said that had no value whatsoever. Whether you liked him or didn't like him, or you approved or you didn't approve, it's completely like water off a duck's back, as they say. It's like just straight through, like no landing place. And it was kind of marvelous to see. Like he didn't need anyone to love him or approve of him. What a concept! And also the whole way that the mind, because you can't, in terms of Dhamma, saying that a person is an arahant is not really quite accurate. There's arahat, the mind is arahata, but the mind that's really awake knows that this is not a person. So that the way that the mind relates to personhood, or the body, the personality, it's completely different. If the mind is totally awakened, then that mind wouldn't say, I'm an enlightened person, or I am an arahant. So it would more phrase it in terms of there is arahata, there is enlightenment, but not this person has got this or is this, that all that etang mama eso amasmi eso meyata, that's all. This is mine, this is what I am, this is myself. That's all fallen away. So you can say there is arahatship, but no person who's an arahant. That's one way of talking about it. So, to continue.
Just a little short.
Sure.
Yeah. Last year you told the instance where Luang Por Chah said, I still have anger, but I don't use it.
Mm-hmm. I mentioned that the other day.
Oh, okay. Something in me doesn't want to accept it, because being an arahant.
Well, the way he, it's like that was his tendency within him, but there was like no landing place for it. And Luang Por Dun said the same kind of thing, that when he was asked as a very very old man, but Luang Por Dun was another disciple of Luang Por Man, and one of his disciples asked him, Luang Por, do you still have anger? And he said, "You, damn my ow," which is like it's there, but I don't receive it. It's like the delivery arrives, but I don't sign for the parcel like Luang Por Chah will say, that the phone rings but I don't pick it up. So there's no, and that's one of those debates within the Buddhist world about the qualities of an arahant. Do they experience defilements but then not attach to them, or do defilements not arise? And so it's one of those much discussed topics. But so I take those comments of like Luang Por Chah, Luang Por Dun as quite a accurate representation of how things work. And also in the scriptures, when you have Mara coming to the Buddha and trying to frighten him or arouse lust in him or greed, conceit, when Mara comes and says, you could turn this whole Himalayan mountain range into gold if you wanted to, and the Buddha then says, I know you, Mara, and even twice that much would not be enough for one person's greed. Or when he's sitting, he's doing walking meditation out in the rain, and this huge kind of Mara appears as this huge naga that attacks him, and the Buddha says, I know you, Mara. I'm not, I know what this is. I would say that what that's representing is that those emotions of fear or greed or whatever are arising, but it's that the Buddha is completely unintimidated by that. There's no threat. There's no danger, because it's the answer is always, I know you, Mara. I know you, evil one, and it's there, but it has absolutely no effect. Or like the imagery of the Buddha sitting under the Bodhi tree, like that Mara's army kind of hurling in spears and they turn into shafts of light, or they throw boulders and they turn into flowers and kind of rain down to the ground. It's like that anything that's thrown into that space under the tree, it's transformed. It goes from weapons to light and flowers and so on. So that's how I understand it, and that feels most realistic. I know for some branches of Theravada it's completely heretical to say that an arahant, or certainly the Buddha, would experience any kind of defilement. But I feel that that's how it works. That I could be wrong. But that sense of those qualities appear, but there's no landing place for them. There's nothing that will receive them or own them. They've got no power. That currency is not valid that side of the border. It's like, sorry, this money has no value in this country. You can't spend it here. That kind of thing. Okay, to continue. The essence of the Buddha's teaching, however, is awakenedness. The Buddha was saying, wake up, not, I am the Buddha and you must believe in me. His teaching is an invitation and an encouragement to awaken. That means you wake up rather than depending on me waking up. This, to me, is very meaningful. In the beginning, I felt a lack of something. I didn't feel good enough. I felt I was a defiled person, a weak person, and I couldn't trust myself. And I wanted to find somebody I could trust. This, of course, in the end led me to Ajahn Chah. But his emphasis was always on waking me up rather than encouraging me to bind myself to him. He could see what I was doing and kept pointing it out. I would ask him, Ajahn Chah, I've been practicing for many years. Am I a stream enterer now? And he would say, how do you expect me to know? He would throw me back on myself. If you don't know, why do you think I would know? And whenever I tried to lean on him in that way, he would, in a gentle way, I never felt he was pushing me away, he'd try to awaken me to what I was doing, to my longing to depend on other people, because I thought they were wise and I was not. Actually, he was very effective in getting me to see what I was doing. I also had this fear of taking responsibility for being wise. My personality would say, don't think you will ever be wise. My personality has this tyrant, so it says, you can't trust yourself, you're a mess. Do you think you are ever going to be wise? And it would go on like that. Then I began to see that this inner tyrant was a habit. It wasn't alive. It was a dead thing, and would say the same thing no matter what. No matter how good I was, I could never be good enough. No matter how strict I was in the Vinaya, I could never be strict enough. People would say, "Oh, Ajahn Sumedho, that was a really good talk you gave." And the inner tyrant would go, "No, it wasn't." So, no matter how much the world came forth and said, "You're really good, you're really wise, you're really the best," the inner tyrant would say, "You're not." By recognizing that this inner tyrant was a habit, I realized that though it seemed alive, it wasn't. It was just something reactive. I then began to see it as something not to believe, something that didn't have any wisdom, something that was dead. It was nothing. It was just that when this button was pushed, it went, "You're not good enough." And when it was pushed again, "You're not good enough." Pushed again, "You're not good enough." And that was all it could say. So, don't believe that kind of thing. Don't give it any ground in your consciousness. "I'm not good enough the way I am, and I need to practice in order to become enlightened," is a sense of I, me as a person who's got to do something now in order to become something else in the future. And by contemplating such things, one realizes it all is based on delusion. For one thing, eternity is now. When you contemplate the present moment, the future is the unknown, isn't it? What is tomorrow right now? It is what you don't know. You can speculate, guess, and so forth, but this is all taking place now. The past is what you remember. So you remember yesterday or 10 years ago, but that's a memory arising in the present. And "I am this person," quote unquote, is an assumption, isn't it? When you observe your personality, it changes according to conditions. So, your personality changes according to the conditions you are in. Whether you are with friends or enemies, with your parents or with your husband or wife, with your colleagues, alone, in the monastery, or at the summer school, your personality changes accordingly, because that's the way it is. It adapts itself to the particular conditions present. Yet one has this assumption that "I am this person" all the time. What we're actually doing, of course, is creating assumptions and never questioning them, never looking into what we are doing. Awakened awareness allows us to see this. When we rest in this buddho, or this pure state of being, this listening, this attention, we begin to see how changeable and ephemeral the personality is, and how it depends on conditions for it to be happy or sad, ebullient, depressed, bored or fulfilled, or for it to feel accepted or rejected. But awareness transcends these personality conditions. It's a constant factor, as distinct from the personality, which is ephemeral, and we begin to see that we cannot trust our personality as our identity, because it is not what we are, even though it says so and seems so. We therefore break out of its limitations through awareness, not by rejecting the personality, not by trying to not have a personality, which would be impossible anyway, but by ceasing to be committed to the personality as myself. We limit ourselves all the time by committing ourselves to the personality. We bind ourselves often to the very unpleasant limitations that we habitually get caught in. Once we see that, we can free ourselves, we can let go. Our real identity then is in the awareness and in this attitude of welcoming, of metta. By trusting awareness, we can learn from it and find that we can accept and welcome even the most horrible things, the things we are most frightened of. Once we trust in this practice, we find that we have space even for what we most dread. Then that fear and dread drops away. So this is again a very common theme that you get in Luang Por Sumedho's teachings, that I'm an unenlightened person who's got to do something now in order to become enlightened in the future. And we might hear those words and say, yeah, right. Isn't that what we're here for? But again, it's not as though no work needs to be done, or no effort needs to be made. But what it is pointing to is that in that formulation, I am not good enough the way I am and I need to practice in order to become enlightened, is there's an I am this person. This is me. I am a person who lacks this quality called enlightenment. And I need to do something in order to become different. So I'll be a different person in the future. I'll be this enlightened person off there in the future. And so that it's not as though no work needs to be done, no effort needs to be made, but it needs to be diligent effortlessness. Or effortless diligence, you can put it either way. But so that if that framework of I am this person who needs to do something now is let go of, then the life in the monastery and the work of our meditation and living skillfully, that can all operate in an uninhibited, a free way, and the best results that can come from that will come from that. But it's not cast into the form of I'm doing something now to become something else in the future. Does that make sense? It's as I was saying the other day, it's a paradigm shift from me and my problems, and what I've got to do now in order to become something else in the future, to being awake now, and being awake to the perceptions of the past, being awake to the imagined perceptions of the future, and that those all happen in the present. So that's where we can really make a difference, and that the more there is learning how to find that mysterious balance, the mysterious middle way of making the effort to wake up, then but that effort being made free of self-view, not like me who's got to wake up, but rather it's waking up from the me rather than the me who's doing the waking up. Kind of need to be quick on your feet. And rather like we feel that we're imprisoned or limited by the personality. That I want to be free of this personality. Well, the personality is the I is the thing that is the prison. The person is the prison. So that I want to be a free person. It's like, well, it's impossible. the person, the I is the personality is the prison. So that it's that when that attachment is let go of, then the imprisonment ends. But it's not the ego that can be liberated, or the person can't be liberated. It's that the heart is liberated from personhood. As I say over and over, that which knows the person isn't the person. That awareness, that awakened quality, is not personal. It's not female or male or old or young. It's not monastic, lay or Theravada or Mahayana or as any label. It's just awake. And so that freeing of that awakening is the purpose of the effort that's being made. And it is effort, it's work. So, but in the teachings, it's called the karma that leads to the end of karma, the work that leads to the end of, or the action that leads to the end of action. Any other questions, comments? They've been very quiet on the nun side today. Anything else? Yes.
If the mind is attached to this body, you are continuing from what we said before. That past life, how do people know the past life? Is that connected to the mind that is doing?
Mine was attached to that body.
And it's the same mind?
Well, the one of the interesting ways that the Buddha, because you're not the first person to ask this question, big surprise. One of the ways that the Buddha responded to that same question was he said when someone asked him, he said, "So think of yourself as a young baby, 1-year-old child, a young baby. Are you the same person or are you different?" He said, "Well, in some respects I'm the same, in some respects I'm different." Exactly. The adult couldn't be here without the child being there, but the adult is not the same as the child. Things that happen to the child will have their effect on what happens to the adult, but the adult is not the same as the child. There's a causal connection. There's a relatedness, and one affects the other. You can't say that they're entirely the same, or you can't say they're entirely different. So when people ask about rebirth, then and they say, well, what gets reborn? Then usually the simplest answer is habits. Whatever the mind loves, whatever it hates, whatever it is familiar with, that's what it will be drawn back to. And so that personally, I've never had any difficulty with the idea of past lives, future lives, and such like. It's always. I remember coming across the idea when I was about 8 or 9 years old, and thinking, that makes much more sense. That growing up in sort of Church of England Christianity is the sort of received knowledge about religion, that coming out of nowhere and then living a human life and then going off to heaven or hell forever seemed. I knew that was really weird, and it didn't feel right. Whatever's happening, that's not what's happening. I don't know what is happening, but that seems really strange. And then coming across the idea, it was just from a film I saw when I was a child, and in part of the story was this person had was realized they'd lived a life 1,000 or 2,000 years before, and that they had a previous existence. And it was just part of the story. It wasn't like the main thing, but it was part of the story. And there was this immediate feeling, that makes much more sense. And so even though I have a scientific background, and that many people who think in scientific ways think, well, there's, you can't prove it, or it doesn't make sense, or it's illogical, I found it makes perfect sense to me. It's like a law of conservation of energy. So if you think of consciousness as a form of energy, then it's just like a wave. When you see a wave coming out from the sea, coming into the shore, it looks like a single wall of water that's out in the sea and is coming to the shore. It's not actually, the energy is moving, but the water itself is moving in not exactly circles, but kind of it's just, it's the energy, the wave is a wave of energy moving through, and it's not actually that lump of water that's out in the sea and that's moving in and hitting the shore, but it's the water itself is kind of moving in circles. And so that that wave of energy, if you like, is the wave of attachments. Things that you like, things that you dislike, things that you're familiar, things that are seen as being things that you love or hate. So in this respect, hatred is as much of an attachment as love. So as a cause for rebirth, and if you're dying, you think, never again. Whatever happens, wherever I get reborn, I'll be okay as long as it's not there. As long as I'm not around him. It's like, oh man, you should have done that. That's like, okay, locked in. It's like the homing beacon. Because hatred is as powerful an attachment as love, I would say. And anybody who's watched their mind for more than a week would recognize that. So. The degree to which the mind can be identified with other bodies, other personalities, then that will carry on, and from one life to another, as one life comes to an end, then that momentum of habit will seek another birth where they can actualize those same habits of love and hate and so forth. But that's rather a large subject to begin. That's 7 o'clock in the evening. Next time. Or not, depending on what the future brings. Sadhu